Welcome back to UPSC with AS. Today's topic is Preamble of Indian Constitution. But before we deep dive into its meaning and importance, let's first try to understand it visually through a short video. So some things must be clear after watching the short video. But let's now get into the deep explanation. Let's start with introduction. So the American Constitution was the first one to begin with the preamble. Many countries like India followed this practice. So where we got the inspiration to include a preamble in our constitution, it is from the American Constitution that India got the inspiration. And the term preamble refers to the introduction or preface to the constitution. It contains the summary or essence of the constitution. So preamble can be regarded as an introductory statement or basically a preface or a summary of the constitution. Like we will be dealing in this video that in the preamble various words like justice, sovereign, socialism, liberty, these all are mentioned. But these are nothing but it's just the ideals and summary of the whole constitution, that the idea it has tried to achieve. N.A. Palikiwala, an eminent jurist and constitutional expert, called preamble an identity card of the constitution. So what does an identity card tell? It tells that what is the name of the person, what are the basic characteristics of the person. So identity card holds the identity of any person. Preamble is the identity card of the constitution. It tells that what is the nature of state as defined by the preamble, and it also tells what are the ideals that a state must achieve. These are also mentioned in the preamble only. The preamble of the Indian Constitution is based on the Objectives Resolution, which is drafted and moved by the Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. It has been amended only once by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976, which added 3 new words: socialist, secular, and integrity. It's a short form to remember these, that is SSI. C. Alright, so in introduction, we have looked upon to certain aspect, and the things that are important to remember from this is that India got the inspiration to create a preamble from the American Constitution. Second point that we have to remember, that it is like a preface or it is like a summary of the constitution. Then it is also called as identity card of the constitution by an eminent jurist, that is N.A. Palikiwala. Also, it is based upon the Objective Resolution. Now, Objective Resolution was basically introduced by the Jawaharlal Nehru in the Constituent Assembly. And it has been amended once, that is through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, which added socialist, secular, and integrity to the preamble. These are certain important points that are to be noted in the introduction part of the preamble chapter. Let's now move further. Before deep diving or before moving to each particular word in the preamble, we need to first be thorough with that what is the exact text of the preamble or what is basically written in it. So let's read the preamble once. It mentions that we the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure all its citizens justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, in our Constituent Assembly this 26th day of November 1949 do hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves this Constitution. So now we can see in the preamble that first it is we the people of India, that we the people of India have basically constituted India. And what is the form of India that we have constituted? It is basically sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic and a republic. And what is the aim that we need to ensure and secure to all of its citizens? It is basically justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. And also it is mentioned a date is given, that is 26th of November 1949, in which on which day we basically adopted and enacted and gave to ourselves this constitution. So people of India are giving themselves this constitution on 26 November 1949. And these are what are the ideals and what is the nature of state that they want. Now let's look into what are the basically ingredients which are mentioned in the preamble. So there are basically 4 ingredients. We have seen that first is the source of authority. So preamble state that constitution derives its authority from the people of India. So we have seen here that we the people of India give to ourselves this constitution. So who is basically the authority or who is basically the power holding position? It is the people of India. Second ingredient is basically the nature of Indian state. We have seen that these are the qualities that they need in an Indian state, that is basically sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic and republican polity. And what are the objectives of the constitution? What does it aim to secure to all its citizens? It is justice, liberty, equality and fraternity. A short form to remember this is basically JLF, and this is SSSDR. And the last one is about the date of adoption of constitution, which is basically we have already noted 26 November 1949. So there are basically 4 ingredients of the preamble. The first one being source of authority, second one being the nature, third one being the objective and fourth one being the date of adoption of constitution. Now let's go into each of the nature of the state that is mentioned, that is sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic, starting with sovereign. So in simple words, what does sovereign mean? Sovereign means that India is basically independent and it can conduct its affairs independently, both the affairs, that is internal affairs and external affairs. When we talk about the internal affairs, there can be affairs such as law and order, and external affairs can be such as maintaining international relations. When we talk about the sovereign state, so the word sovereign basically implies that India is neither a dependency or nor a dominion of any other nation, but it is an independent state. What do we understand when we talk about an independent state? Independent state is basically someone who is not under the influence or who is not bound by the decision of any other state. When you are dependent or when you are dominion, then you recognize some other state as a higher authority. However, when you are independent, you do not recognize such higher authority and you are basically you can basically take your own decisions. So this is that is what it means, that there is no authority above it and it is free to conduct its own affair, both internal and external. When you are dominion, in some cases you are given this internal freedom of to conduct its affair, but the external choice is still not provided. Though in 1949 India declared the continuation of her full membership of the Commonwealth of Nations and accepted the British Crown as the head of Commonwealth, this extra constitutional declaration does not affect India's sovereignty in any matter. So if India is accepting to be a member of the Commonwealth of Nations or to accept the British Crown as the head of the Commonwealth, so India is not accepting the British Crown as a head of India, but it is just an organization, that is Commonwealth of Nations. So this does not have any bearing upon the sovereignty of India. And it is also mentioned by Jawaharlal Nehru कि because India is in a free will to basically come out of this Commonwealth of Nation. It is upon India to recognize itself as a membership or not, thus it is a voluntary decision and it does not have any bearing or any impact on the sovereignty of India's nature. Further, India's membership of the UNO, that is United Nations Organization, also is in no way constitute a limitation on her sovereignty. Being a sovereign state, India can either acquire a foreign territory or cede a part of its territory in favor of a foreign state. So now we have looked upon that India is sovereign. What does it mean that India is independent? It can conduct its internal and external affairs independently. When we are talking about this external affairs, we can look into two criteria. That is, number one, acquire a foreign territory. For example, India acquires a territory from example Bangladesh. So that's acquiring a foreign territory, and it can also cede. That is, for example, giving certain type of villages to Bangladesh. So this is basically part of the sovereignty. India is independent in doing either of the case. That's the whole concept of sovereignty as mentioned in the preamble. Next, when we look upon the socialism, so socialism was added by the 42nd Amendment in 1976. But it is to be noted that the constitution had a socialist content in the form of DPSP. Socialism, now what is socialism? It is basically means that state is working for the betterment of the people, that there is equality of division of wealth, and all of this, and the means of production is basically in the hands of the state, and the division is also done equally. There is no like holding of wealth, or there is no like upper class or lower class. So this form of provision were already available in the DPSP. When we look into Article 39, it basically provides that there should be no inequality in the measures of income, wealth, status, this all. So it is in a nature, socialism has been promoted earlier only in DPSP, but it was made fundamental into preamble by the 42nd Amendment. In other words, it was here to implicit in the constitution, which has now made explicit. Moreover, the Congress party itself adopted a resolution to establish a socialist pattern of society in its Avadhi session as early as 1955 and took measures accordingly. So in 1955 only, the socialism was promoted by Congress in its Avadhi session. Notably, the Indian brand of socialism is a democratic socialism, and it's not a communistic socialism, which involves the nationalization of all means of production and distribution and abolition of private property. So what this means is that India does not follow a communistic socialism. What is communistic socialism? For example, this is the land present. So it basically involves that all this land will belong to state, and whatever activity will be done, that will be done by state. Material division will be done by state. So democratic socialism, on the other hand, believes in the faith of mixed economy. India is a democratic socialist. It believes in mixed economy, where both public and private sector can coexist. Now, the Supreme Court has mentioned that democratic socialism aims to end poverty, ignorance, disease, and inequality of opportunity. So it is very important for India to believe in the idea of democratic socialism. Now, what does democratic socialism mean? It means that both public and private will come together and work for the social welfare. Not only public will have all of the resources, but private will have also some kind of opportunities. Now, Indian socialism is also a mix of Marxism and Gandhianism. So there is some fundamental details between the socialism that was stated by Marxism and Gandhism. The first and the foremost fundamental difference is that Gandhiji was always against the use of violence. However, Marx basically stated that it is okay to use violence, and ends do not and ends can justify the means. So if you get the end, that is a good, common good, social welfare, then whatever be the means. But Gandhiji is not of this opinion. Also, but they both believed in a stateless society, that ultimately there should be no state and the people should self-govern themselves, leaning towards Gandhian socialism. And the new economic policy, that is liberalization, privatization, globalization, has however diluted the socialist credentials of Indian state. Why? Because now there will be more influence of the private sector and foreign sector will have more influence. Now when we talk about the word, that is secularism. So secularism, as we have seen in socialism, was also added by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. However, in the Supreme Court in 1974, it has stated that although the word secular state were not expressly mentioned in the Constitution, there can be no doubt that Constitution maker wanted to establish such a state, and accordingly Article 25 to 28 have been included. The Indian Constitution embodies the positive concept of secularism, that is, all religion in our country have same status and support from the state. Now, when we are talking about secularism, so secularism is nothing but it is basically that when there are religions in a society, there has to be certain type of relationship with the between the religion and the state. Now, if there will be no relation, that is, there will be no interference in each other's sector by either the religion or either the state, then it will be basically a Western model of socialism. But what does secularism? But what does Indian secularism state? That religion and state can overlap. Now, state can basically hinder into the religion to get away with certain type of discriminatory practices, like we have seen in the case of Sabarimala case, where women were not of menstruating age were not allowed, but Supreme Court intervened and it was made allowed to the women to also participate. Now, what does it mentions that though secularism was added to the preamble by the 42nd Amendment Act, but it was earlier only present by the virtue of Article 25 to 28. Because 25 to 28, what does it talk about? That everyone has a freedom of conscience, they have a freedom to propagate, profess, they can own their religious institution. We'll be dealing it in the chapter of fundamental rights. They also have, like, they cannot be forced upon to pay tax for the promotion of any particular religion. In India, all of the religions are given same status and support from the state. That is the part of Indian secularism. We'll mention and we'll study it in further detail on a separate lecture on secularism as a concept, but we'll definitely study it. For now, it is important to understand the core difference between the Western model and the Indian model. When we are talking about Western model, there is no overlap in the activities between state and religion. However, in Indian matters, wherever it becomes necessary, the state can intervene to get away with the discriminatory practices in the religious matter. Next, coming on to democracy. Now, democracy is an important feature. It is called the rule of people. It is from demos democracy. So it is basically the rule of people in simple language only. So democratic polity, as stipulated in the preamble, is based on the doctrine of popular sovereignty. What is the doctrine of popular sovereignty? The popular sovereignty basically means that people are supreme in themselves and people have a right to govern themselves. So democracy now is of two types, that is direct and indirect. We here will see that democracy is of two types, direct democracy and indirect democracy. We'll see that what is the difference. When we are talking about direct democracy, the people are themselves the supreme power and they are directly involved. For example, people will directly vote on a bill. However, in India, do we directly vote on a bill? No, that's not the case. We elect our MLAs or we elect our MPs. That is how the democracy works in India. So we can naturally differentiate between the direct democracy and indirect democracy. For example, this is a bill. In Switzerland, what will happen? That people will directly vote on this bill. So that's a case of direct democracy. There are different forms of direct democracy also. We'll study it now in this slide only, but there are also different types of indirect democracy. But the core difference between direct and indirect democracy is clear, that here people are directly involved, however here people are not directly involved. Now when we talk about there are four devices of direct democracy, that is referendum, initiative, recall and plebiscite. We will study the difference between all of these. However, in the case of indirect democracy, the representative elected by the people exercise the supreme power and thus carry on government and make laws. This kind of democracy is also called representative democracy. And this representative democracy or this indirect type of democracy can be of two types, that is parliamentary form and presidential form. We'll get in the further details in a separate lecture video. But for now, what we have to understand is that in parliamentary democracy, executive is basically responsible to legislature. However, in presidential, there is a strict difference between legislature, executive and judiciary. For example, in India, for you to become a council or a minister, you must be an MP or an MLA. However, 6 months time period is given for you to become, but you must become a member. Only then you can become. And once the executive or the minister lose their confidence in legislature, they have to resign. And they must hold the majority or the support of legislature. However, this is not the case in the presidential system. So now we have discussed that democracy is basically, what does it mean? It means popular sovereignty. It can be of two types, that is direct and indirect. Indirect can be of further two types, that is parliamentary and presidential. India follow parliamentary form of indirect democracy. Now, before moving forward onto the indirect democracy or the type of democracy that is followed in India, we should first discuss the different four types or devices or direct democracy, which is often in use in countries like Switzerland. So first it is referendum. Now what is the meaning of referendum? Referendum is basically a procedure whereby a proposed legislation is referred to the electorate for settlement by the direct vote. So in referendum, you send a proposal of a legislation, for example proposal of a bill, to a electorate, to a group of people. Now they will directly vote upon it and it is a kind of direct election. So for example, you want voting to be done on a bill of women reservation. So you directly give it to a group of people who are called the electorate. For example, in upcoming videos, we will discuss that what is the electorate difference between presidential election and vice president election. But this group of voting people are called electorate, and when they give directly their vote, it is called a referendum. The second point is basically initiative. What do you mean by initiative? Initiative is where the people can propose a bill to the legislature for enactment. So when the people themselves come up with a bill on women reservation, it is called an initiative, where people take the initiative to make the bill or to take more to take more engagement or to take more action or role in the lawmaking procedure. When we talk about the recall is basically, as the name suggests, to call back something. Recall is a method by which the voters can remove a representative or an officer before the expiry of its term. So for example, in India, if we elect an MP, but we find out that MP is not doing any work for its constituency or is not giving any opinions in parliament, then if India follows direct democracy, through the right of recall, we can recall that legislature back and we can elect someone else. And the fourth one is a plebiscite. The plebiscite is a method of obtaining the opinion of people on any issue of public importance. And plebiscite is generally done in the cases of territorial dispute. Alright, so we have now seen the four different devices of direct democracy. Now moving that the Indian Constitution provides for a representative parliamentary democracy under which executive is responsible to the legislature for all its policies and actions. We have understood it earlier in this slide. The universal adult franchise, that is everyone who is above the age of 18, has been given a right of vote. Periodic election, rule of law, independence of judiciary and absence of discrimination on certain ground are manifestation of democratic character of Indian polity. Now the term democratic is used in preamble in a broader sense, embracing not only political democracy but also social and economic democracy. Voting in election is only a part of the political democracy. However, we all have to be aware that democracy is not just in a political sense, but also in social and economic sense. In social sense and in economic sense also, everybody should be equal, and everybody should get basically an equal opportunity. This concept was brought forward by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and he stated that political democracy cannot last unless there lies at the base of it social democracy. So he stated that unless we have social democracy at base, the political democracy cannot exist in any country. What does social democracy mean? Now he explained that what is the meaning of social democracy. So it means a way of life which recognizes liberty, equality and fraternity. Now for social democracy to exist, what we need to have is basically liberty, equality and fraternity. The principle of liberty, equality and fraternity are not to be treated as separate items in a trinity. They form a union of trinity in sense that divorce one from the other, it is to defeat the very purpose of democracy. Liberty cannot be divorced from equality, equality cannot be divorced from liberty, nor can liberty and equality be divorced from fraternity. Without equality, liberty cannot produce the supremacy of few over the many. Equality without liberty would kill people initiative. So now what we have basically concluded here is that what is the meaning that Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is trying to give is that for political democracy to exist, that everyone should be equal in election, right to vote, independence of judiciary, there must exist social democracy at ground level. Now what is the meaning of this social democracy? That there should be equality, liberty and fraternity. We will understand in the upcoming slides the meaning of these individual terms, but he states that and these three are in trinity. For example, liberty is not present. There is no case that equality and fraternity can be present. Now, and also these three exist and go hand in hand. If you violate one, the other two are ultimately and consequently violated. That is what he is trying to convey. In the same context, the Supreme Court observed in 1997 that Constitution envisioned to establish an egalitarian social order, rendering to every citizen economic, social and political justice in a social and economic democracy of Bharat Republic. The Supreme Court has also stated the same thing only. So in democracy, what all we have read? We have read that it is of two types, direct and indirect. Indirect, we have read the four devices. In indirect, we have studied that it is of two types, parliamentary and presidential. India followed parliamentary democracy. Now, democracy is not only in political aspect, it is also social and economic in nature. And liberty, equality and fraternity exist in a trinity. They cannot be divorced from each another. So now when we have to talk about the last nature of state that is mentioned in the preamble, it is about republic. What does republic mean? Republic simply means that head of the state in India, which in the case of India is basically a president, is basically elected by the people. Now it can be elected directly or indirectly. In India it is elected indirectly, but it is elected by the people. Now a very important point that we have to remember here is that democracy can either be monarchy or it can be republic. It does not mean that always in a democracy the head of the state has to be elected. Democracy basically means that head of the government is elected. When we talk about head of government, it is basically Prime Minister in India. So if in India we had that basically a Raja would be the monarch, that is head of state, but the Prime Minister is elected, India would still be categorized as a democracy. But it is two different subset of democracy. Either it can be republic or it can be monarch. In republic, the head of the state as well as the head of the government, these both are elected by the people. When we talk about the republic, so a democratic polity can be classified into two categories, that is monarchy and republic. In a monarchy, the head of the state enjoys a hereditary position, that is the son of the king will become king. That is, he or she comes to office through succession. Example, Britain. In republic, on the other hand, the head of the state is always elected directly or indirectly for a fixed period. Also, for republic, two conditions have to be present, that the head of the state is elected directly or indirectly, that does not matter, and it is also for a fixed period of time. He cannot stay in the office forever once elected. Therefore, the Republic in our preamble indicate that India has an elected head called the president, and he or she is also elected indirectly for a fixed period of 5 years. A republic also means two other things. One, vesting of political sovereignty in people, because the head of the state topmost position is coming from the people themselves and not in a single individual like a king. And second, the absence of privileged class, and hence all public offices being open to people without any discrimination. That people can occupy any public office, and it is not basically a monarchy that is existing. Means the people have been given an open opportunity to come into the public sphere. Now, this is all about the nature of the state that has been mentioned in the preamble. Now, let's look on to the objectives that the preamble wants to secure to all its citizens. The first one being justice. So, the term justice in preamble has been given three distinct forms, that is social, economic, and political. And already justice has been an idea which is embedded in the fundamental right, also in the DPSP, that is Directive Principle of State Policy. Now we have to understand that what justice means in this three contexts, that is social justice, economic justice, and political justice. Starting with social justice. What does social justice mean? So it basically means that everybody should be treated equally and there should be no social distinction. For example, there should be no classification in the society which is done on the basis of gender, like men, women, on the basis of caste, on the basis of color, sex, religion, and so on. There should be no classification between Hindu, Muslim, etc. So that is basically social justice. And also it means the absence of privilege being given to anyone. But if there is absence of privilege, then how the policy of reservation or affirmative action may be justified, because these people do need help. So there is so the justice also keeps the idea of the improvement in the conditions of backward classes and women in its area. So basically social justice means that equal treatment to all the citizens should be given without any social distinction which is based on caste, color, race, sex, religion, and so on. It also means absence of privilege being given to any particular section of society, and improvement in the condition of backward class, which are SC, ST, and OBC, and also women. Now let's look upon the economic justice part. What does economic justice mean? Economic justice basically means that there should be non-discrimination on people based upon the economic factors. That there should be no classification in society that these are the rich class, these are poor class. There should not be any classification or any distinction done on the economic factor. It means elimination of glaring inequalities in wealth, income, and property. So when we combine social justice and economic justice, it gives us a new justice, that is distributive justice. So distributive justice has two parts, that is social and economic. When we talk about social, it means that everybody is equal, no special privileges being given, and economic means that there is no discrimination based upon the economic factor. And the third justice area that we have to study is basically the political justice. What does it mean? That all citizens should have equal political right, access to political offices, and equal voice in the government. For example, one manifestation of political justice is one person, one vote, universal ideal franchise in India. So now where are these ideas of social, economic, and political justice being taken from? These are being inspired from the Russian Revolution 1917. The next objective or the aim of the preamble that we have to look upon is to liberty. So liberty is basically, liberty can have two aspects, that is, one is positive aspect, one is negative aspect. When we talk about the negative aspect, it is just that nobody should stop or restraining. Like, we have liberty to do anything. We can go on strikes, we can block the roads, but this is not the liberty which can be taken into a realistic world. However, a positive liberty is one. So what is the meaning of a positive liberty? So liberty in a negative sense means absence of restraint on activities of individual. However, in a positive sense, it means that providing opportunity for the development of individual personalities. That individual personalities should have the liberty to develop in whatever manner they want to, and whatever opportunity they want to take, that should be given to them. The preamble secures to all. Now, 5 types of liberty is given to by the preamble to all, that is thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship. TEBFW, it's easy to remember this way. TEBFW. Through their fundamental right, enforceable in court of law in case of violation. So it is very important to understand in a PYQ also these terms were as it is asked. So liberty as elaborated in the preamble is very essential for the successful functioning of Indian democratic system. However, liberty does not mean the license to do what one likes and has to be enjoyed within the limitation mentioned in the constitution itself. So, for example, you have been given liberty by the freedoms which are mentioned in Article 19. For example, Article 19(1)(a) talks about freedom of speech and expression, but it also has its corresponding reasonable restrictions mentioned in 19 clause 2, such as security of the state. There should be no basically no degradation in the what is the relation with the friendly state. There should be morality, justice should be taken care of. Now this means that liberty does not mean the license to do anything which one wishes to do. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, this trinity is taken from the French Revolution of 1789 to 1799. So now we are clear till the part that this trinity of liberty, equality, and fraternity, forming a base of social democracy, is taken from the French Revolution. The next thing that we have to discuss is basically the equality. Now, what does equality mean? Equality means basically the absence of special privilege to any person and the provision of adequate opportunity for all without any discrimination. Like liberty, equality can also have 2 types of meaning, that is a positive meaning and a negative meaning. When we talk about a negative meaning, it is basically absence of any type of special privilege. For example, that one particular group should not be given any type of special privilege, the other should not be deprived of one. This is just a negative meaning. However, when we talk about the positive meaning of equality, it means that adequate opportunity for all the individuals should be present and it should be without any type of discrimination. For example, if group A is given any type of opportunity, group B should also be given the same type of opportunity. So the preamble secures to all the equality of 2 things, that is status and opportunity. Just remember it as S and O. That equality is present of SO, status and opportunity. This provision embraces 3 dimensions of equality: civic, political, and economic. Though the preamble has mentioned that equality should be of status and of opportunity, but the equality can also have 3 dimensions, that is civic, political, and economic. When we are talking about the civic equality, that is what is the equality for the normal civilians. It is mentioned in articles such as Article 14, 15, 17, 18, 16. We will discuss it separately in the Fundamental Rights chapter and deeply in this chapter, in the Fundamental Rights chapter. But for a quick overview, it mentions that Article 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 talks about that there should be no untouchability, there should be no titles such as Maharaja, Raj Darbar. These type of titles should not be there. Everyone should be equal when it comes to the opportunity of getting a public employment. There should be no discrimination in public area on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. So these are all a quick and a bird's eye vision of the article of 14 to 18. We will be dealing in it much detail. So now there are 2 provisions in the constitution that seek to achieve political equality. That is, one being, it is not to be declared ineligible for inclusion in electoral roll on the ground of religion, race, caste, or sex. So on the basis of religion, race, caste, or sex, anyone cannot be deleted from the electoral vote because everyone has a right to vote. and two the elections of Lok Sabha and State Assembly has to be done on the basis of adult suffrage. That is, everyone should have a right to vote. Anyone who is above 18 has a right to vote in the election. Also, DPSP in its various articles such as 39, which secure men and women equal right to adequate livelihood, equal pay, equal work, these are also just a manifestation of the broader principle of equality. We'll be dealing these provisions in quite detail in fundamental right and DPSP chapter. For this is just the concept of equality that is mentioned in the preamble. As we have just mentioned, that preamble is like a summary, or it is like a nichode of the constitution. The next thing that we have to discuss is basically fraternity. Fraternity means nothing, but it's just a sense of common brotherhood. Bhaichara is fraternity. So fraternity is a sense of common brotherhood. Now, how will this sense of common brotherhood come? Like, we all are Indians, so it will come through a system of single citizenship. You are also Indian, I am also Indian. You are from Punjab, I am from Haryana. This doesn't matter, but we all are common in one thing, that is, we all are Indian. And this is the motive, or this is just the idea behind the fraternity. Also, the fundamental duty 51A says that it shall be duty of every citizen of India to promote harmony and spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending religious, linguistic, regional and sectional diversity. So when we are talking about this fundamental duty of 51A, it also states that it is the duty of every one of us that we should have a sense of common brotherhood, a sense of common fraternity, and we should not basically go over this because of certain type of religious, linguistic, regional, or these type of diversity and differences. This is much smaller, and the common sense of brotherhood should be protected and secured by all the citizens of India. The preamble also declared that fraternity has to assure two things: the dignity of individual and unity and integrity of nation. So now, for example, it is mentioned that the fundamental duty that there should not be any type of derogatory practices against women. Now, if all the people of India will have a common sense of brotherhood, we will see every one of us as our own. There will not be any type of derogatory practices against women. So this is the idea behind fraternity, that we should ensure that there is dignity of individual and unity and integrity of the nation. Now, we have studied on the first slide only that the three words were added by the 42nd Amendment Act. The third one being this integrity of the India. Now, we have to look upon the view of K.M. Munshi, who was also a member of the drafting committee. When we'll discuss about the making of constitution, I will also give you a trick to quickly learn the member of the drafting committee. For now, we have to discuss the point of view of K.M. Munshi. The phrase dignity of the individual signifies that constitution not only ensures material benefit and maintain a democratic setup, but that is also recognize the personality of every individual is sacred. Every individual is unique and every individual is sacred in themselves. You cannot degrade or derogate any individual person. That is what K. Munshi is trying to give, or is trying to basically speak about. This highlight, now the fraternity idea is basically highlighted by some of the provisions of fundamental right and directive principles of state policy, which ensures the dignity of the individual is intact. Further, the fundamental right also protect the dignity of women. We have already discussed about this. The phrase unity and integrity of nation is now basically embraced through Article 1. What does Article 1 state? We will discuss it in the chapter of Union and Territory. But what does it state? It states that India as a union of state. It does not state that India is a fraternity of state or India is a group of state. India is a union of state. What does union of state mean? It means that states do not have right to secede from the union. Union is a bigger entity than state. It implies that it is indestructible nature of Indian Union. Union is one. States can come and go. State can be created, destructed, but union cannot be destructed. Union is indestructible. It aims at overcoming hindrances to national integration like communalism, regionalism, casteism, linguism, secessionalism, and so on. For example, if people try to get into the idea of regionalism, that one area is bigger than another or one area is supreme to other, that is not the case. This is to basically, the fraternity idea is to overcome such type of hindrances which is present quite in the Indian society. Now we have to study that what is the significance of studying the preamble. We have studied that okay, now preamble, what are all are mentioned in the preamble, what is basically the meaning of the words which are mentioned in the preamble. Now we have to understand that what is the significance of adding a preamble in itself in the constitution, like what is the need. Now preamble is basically the basic philosophy and fundamental values of the constitution. Now we have to understand the significance of preamble through the idea that is given by various jurists, like starting from Sir Aladhi Krishnaswamy Iyer, who was also a member of the Constituent Assembly. He stated that the preamble of a constitution expresses what we have thought or dreamt of so long. So he basically mentions that whatever the freedom fighter or whatever the national strugglist or whatever the national freedom fighter of our country had thought that at that time, that one day we will have a separate nation, that is India. What all do we need to secure its citizen? What all we did not get but we need to secure to its future? That is what is signified in the preamble, that India is independent. All the religions are respected in India. Public and private entities get equal opportunity. We have a democracy. Our head of state is elected. We need to ensure justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. This is what we had thought and dreamt of so long. The next idea is of K.M. Munshi. He states that it is like a horoscope of our social and of our sovereign and democratic republic. What is horoscope? Horoscope is basically prediction, like it is the idea or the view or the aim of our nation. Pandit Thakurdas Bhargav, who is also a member of the Constituent Assembly, stated that preamble is the most important part of the constitution. It is the soul of the constitution, key to constitution. It is the jewel set of constitution. It is a proper yardstick with one can measure the worth of constitution, because the preamble of India is so powerful that it gives necessary nature of the state, the popular sovereignty concept. This we can just by reading the preamble we can like make a guess that okay, what will be the worth of the Indian constitution, how magnanimous it will be. He described that preamble was the keynote to constitution. As we are discussing the significance, the next thing that was stated by Ernst Barker, who is a basically English political scientist. He stated that preamble is a keynote to constitution. What is a keynote? Keynote is basically something which is so integral that without it we cannot understand the constitution of India. So preamble has this value to constitution. He was so moved by the text of preamble that he quoted it at the opening of his popular book. He even used the preamble of India for his own book. So that is the significance of India, of the preamble of India. Also, M. Hidyatullah, who is a former Chief Justice of India, he stated that preamble resembles the Declaration of Independence of United States of America, but it is more like a declaration. India declares that it has become independent, sovereign, secular. So it's a declaration of the independence of India. Also, it is a soul of the Constitution. Now when we are talking about the significance of the preamble, we are very much aware that it has very high significance by the key terms which are used by the various thinkers like K.M. Munshi, Pandit Thakurdas Bhargav, Ernst Barker, M. Hidyatullah. We are aware of the significance. The next point that we have to study is that is it a part of constitution or not? It is one of the most high earned controversy that is the preamble a part of constitution or it is not a part of constitution. So the first case, it is in a series of case it is decided that whether it is a part of whether it is part of constitution or not. The first being the Berubari Union case. In Berubari Union case, it was basically the exchange of territories between India and Pakistan was and Bangladesh was done. So Supreme Court stated that preamble shows the general purpose behind the several provisions in constitution and is thus a key to the minds of the maker of the constitution. That what were the constitutional drafters thinking at that time, they put it all into the preamble. This is a very important line that is mentioned, that it is a key to the mind of makers of the constitution. Further, where the terms used in any article are ambiguous or capable of more than one meaning, some assistance at the interpretation may be taken by the objectives enshrined in the preamble. But despite this recognition of significance, the Supreme Court specified opinion that preamble is not a part of constitution. So what was mentioned in this case of Berubari Union, that it is basically key to the mind of the makers of the constitution, and also if there is any ambiguous article which has more than two meanings, we can resort to preamble to find out that what is the actual meaning that it wants to say. But the Supreme Court specifically mentioned that though this huge importance is there, it cannot be stated as a part of the Constitution. The next case that we have to deal is basically the Keshwananda Bharti case of 1973, which is highly renowned for the basic structure doctrine, but it also had to say something about the preamble. What did it say? It stated that the preamble is a part of constitution. So Berubari Union's case stated that preamble is not part of constitution. Keshwananda Bharti case, it was stated that preamble is a part of constitution. It also observed that preamble is of extreme importance and should be read in, and constitution should be read in the light of the preamble. In LIC of India case also it was stated that it is a part. So what are the basic judgments in the part of constitution of India? Feature of the preamble. In Berubari Union case, it was stated that it is not a part of constitution. However, in Keshwananda Bharti case, it is said that it is a part, and also the constitution should be interpreted in the light of preamble. And also in the LIC of India case, same was stated that the Supreme Court again iterated that preamble is a part of constitution. Now, when we talk about that, like any other part of constitution, the preamble was also enacted by the Constituent Assembly, but after the rest of constitution was already enacted. The reason for inserting the preamble at the end was to ensure that it was in conformity with the constitution. So we all are aware that preamble was adopted at the last. However, it is mentioned in the first, also before the the constitution, but it was inserted at the last, so that there is no such provision in the preamble that is against, or that is in violation, or that is in confliction with the provision which is mentioned in the constitution. While forwarding the preamble for vote, the President of Constituent Assembly said the question for preamble stands part of the Constitution. It stated that it is a part of Constitution. So even in the Constitutional Assembly debate, it was held that preamble is a part of Constitution. The motion was then adopted. Hence, we need to remember that it is a part of constitution. Here, 2 points also have to be noted: that preamble is neither a source of power to legislature nor prohibition upon the power of legislature, and also it is non-justiciable. Now, for example, any state comes and it is not following the principle of justice. For that, you can sue that government for being in violation of fundamental right, for any of your fundamental right is being violated, or any DPSP is not being followed. But you cannot go to the court and state that this article is, or this law is not in conformity with the justice as mentioned in preamble. That will not be a suitable argument, because preamble is non-justiciable in court, and also it does not give the power to legislature to basically make law on something. It is given by the constitution, not by the preamble, and it is not prohibition upon the legislature power to make any kind of law. So that's the part of constitution debate, and it is concluded that preamble is a part of constitution. The last thing that we have to read is, okay, it is a part of constitution, then can it be amended? We all know the answer earlier only, that by the 42nd Constitution Amendment Act it was amended. So thus the answer is yes, that it can be amended, but we have to go into integrities, that how it can be amended. So the question as to whether the parliament can be amended under Article 368 arose in the first time in the Keshwananda Bharti case. It was argued that preamble not only can be amended, as it is not a part of constitution. The petitioner contended that amending power in Article 368 cannot be used to destroy or damage the basic elements of the constitution which are enshrined in the preamble. So in Keshwananda Bharti case, as it is the basic and the major case on basic structure doctrine, it mentioned that the key elements and the fundamental elements which are mentioned in preamble, like secular, socialist, democracy, republic, justice, liberty, equality, these all are part of basic structure doctrine. However, the preamble as a whole is not a part of basic structure doctrine. So thus the Supreme Court, however, held that preamble is a part of constitution. The court stated that opinion tendered by the Berubari Union in this regard was strong and held that preamble can be amended, subject to the condition that no amendment is done to the basic feature. Now, what is this basic feature? It is the triple SDR and JLEF. In other words, the court held that basic elements or fundamental feature of constitution as contained in the preamble cannot be altered by an amendment. The court observed the edifice of our constitution is based upon the basic elements mentioned in the preamble. If any of these elements are removed, the structure will not survive and it will not be the same constitution or it cannot maintain its identity. An amending power cannot be interpreted as to confer power on the parliament to take away any of the basic or fundamental characteristic of polity. So it is mentioned that preamble as a whole is not a part of basic sector doctrine, and it is open to amendment because it is a part of constitution under article 368. But the basic features like socialist, sovereigns, secularism, democracy, republic, justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, these are not open to amendment. And also the preamble has been amended only once via 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976, in which SSI, that is socialist, secular and integrity, to the preamble was added, and the amendment was also held valid by the court. So in this lecture video, we have discussed the preamble. We have gotten into details like what are the basic features, the nature of the state, the objectives, amendability, basic part of the constitution of not significance. We have covered all these topic in this video. This topic is discussed in completeness, and it is just you need to revise this content more and more, and revision is the key to success. That's it for today's video. In upcoming videos, we'll discuss more polity content and more history and geography videos. Stay tuned and do like my channel and subscribe the channel and like the video if you like the content.